Hi, how's everybody? Looks sunny out. Is it cold? I'm gonna check. It's a little chilly. To look at my phone to see how cold it is. How are you guys? We had more people last time. Wednesdays are hard. Okay, let's get started. I think that I got everything open. I'm gonna share my screen with you. Get things set up the way I like. Okay, I think I've got my screen shared with you. Last time we had worked on updating our audio CD maintenance app with a LISTBOX so that we could look at a whole list of audio CDs, and we've got everything pretty well working. So yes, very, very nice. Whenever we're looking at our form, if we look at our code, you know, we've got quite a few different methods, kind of a lot going on. So when you're working with a form, sometimes it might be nice to bring up that. Let me get in the right place here. I'm going to right click on my form1.cs, and I would like to view the class diagram. And remember, if you want to view a class diagram and you don't have this option, you can add an existing item or add a new item and choose class diagram, and that'll bring that into your project. But for our Form 1, if we look at our class diagram, we should see that it does give us a lot of information about all of the different controls and everything that we have on our form. I don't know why it's not showing us all of our methods. Being kind of weird. It's because that class is a partial form, so it's just a little weird. All right, so anyways, we have a lot of different pieces that we're working with, getting our form all set up. I'm gonna take a back step just a second and review some of the things that we've looked at, try to get everything clear in everybody's mind. So here we go. Looking at our form controls that we've been adding. Here's some simple code. We have a picture box control on our form, and if somebody clicks it, we're going to make this label visible. All right, so some pretty simple code there. Some things for us to really think about. Whenever we're working with a control on our form, we always use the name of the control followed by the property of the control that we're wanting to impact. So the entire identifier of this property is multi-part. We have the control name first, and then the property name. The different parts of the identifier are separated by a period, and we call that a dot when we're programming. And then our new property value is on the other side of the equal sign. Now, that control uses Boolean, is a Boolean type property because we can set it to either true or false. So we could have an if statement if we wanted to make it into kind of like a toggle, like if it's on, it'll turn off, etc. type thing. We could have an if statement. If label one not visible, then make the visible property false. Otherwise, make it true. Now there's another way we can do that toggle thing. I'm going to bring up our application. And you don't have to do this. I just want to show you this code real quick so you can think about it. We had created our method to do enabling and disabling of all of our controls on our form. I'll show you how we can do a toggle really easily. I could say I want to set the enabled property equal to what the enabled property is not right now. So I put the exclamation point in front of it to make it the opposite, to give it the not. So this would work if my radio button classical enabled was true. This would make it false. If it was false, this would make it true. So this was some really nice code as far as a way to handle that kind of toggle thing. In our application, we don't necessarily want our controls to be toggle. Like if they're off, turn them on. We might call our disable function, or we might call our enable disable method twice in a row to disable all of these fields, and that's okay. So we need to actually pass in our Boolean value, but I wanted to show you that code. It was from a former student, and he had seen it someplace else. Nice way to handle things. It's a good thing for us to think about. Okay, string properties like our text boxes. When we're working with them, we're usually trying to save a value that the user entered or typed in. So if we want to save the value to a variable, we'll have the variable name preceding our equal sign, and then we'll have the name of the control following the equal sign, because whatever precedes the equal sign is being updated by whatever follows the equal sign. So that'll save that .text data into this variable. Now, conversely, if I want to update the text box data, I can put the text box control before the equal sign, and this code will set that text box equal to an empty string. So whenever we're working with our syntax, whenever we want to get a property value, we're going to have a variable to hold that value, then an equal sign, then the control name dot property name. Here we could save the value of our text box text property into a variable named name. Here we're saving a value from a numeric up down into a variable named number. Now, if we want to set the property value, update it, when you really think about it, we're going to have that control name dot property name before our equal sign. Then after the equal sign, we'll have the value that we want to set it to. So here's a couple examples. Updating the text property of our form 1 control. Updating the visible property of a label. So commonly, when we're working with forms, we've already seen a lot of this, but I just wanted to kind of get it down on a piece of paper per se. Form controls are going to be added to the form by the developer. Form control names are lowercase. We've seen that. We've gotten some warnings about that. We know that it does not conform to normal C# standards. Oftentimes, form names of controls will start with a prefix. So we might have LBL for label, TXTBX for text box. When we created ours, we actually used the full word text box as a prefix. And I did that because this TXTBX.text is too many X's, gets too confusing. So I think it's clearer if we just use the whole word text box. But you could see all sorts of different abbreviations for different controls. But it's nice to have that prefix so we know what kind of control it is. We always want to name our controls that we're going to access in our code. So we didn't worry about giving labels names, but our text boxes we did. So in grading, if I were to see text box 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that would be the rubric item that says uses proper names and follows standards. And so that would be a problem with that rubric item because we don't want things named that way. It's too confusing to the people coming after us. Now, when we're looking at our controls, their properties are predetermined. We can't add a new property to a text box. We have to use the ones that are there. And like we've beaten to death, we identify those properties by combining the control name with the property name. And property values can be set or changed during design time or at runtime. So that means I can set a value when I'm designing the form, or I can update a property at runtime when I'm running the form. So again, those are just some things that we've already done. Let's take a look at our form. This application, our audio CD form, I put this newest version, let me make sure, on our Discord channel for our General 102 chat. So the audio CD form list, that's the one that we got done with the other day. We're just going to look at it for a second. So it's not really a big deal. We can just be looking at any one that you like. Ooh, I better set myself as here. Keep forgetting. All right, so when I'm looking at my form design, I know that I also have, I'm gonna close this, my form code. So a form is kind of like more than just one thing, right? We've seen that. It's a whole combination of things. So if I look at my Solution Explorer and expand my form, I'm going to see the designer subclass or partial class and my resource partial class. If I keep going, looking at form items, I'm finally going to get to the actual form object. So right before that, what if I look at this form1designer.cx code? Right, you don't have to do attendance if you're in Zoom. I can find it. Give me all these different places to look. So let's look at our form1designer.cs. So this also says partial class. If I switch to my form code, it is partial class. So these two are going to be combined together into one form1 class for our compile. But they're set up as partial class so that we can separate things and not get distracted. So looking at the designer code, this code is generated by Windows when we create our form. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. The initialize component method is the method that's called by our constructor. So here's where that method actually is. If we look at that method, it really just creates a bunch kind of variables. They're controls. So we end up with, let me close this out, sorry. There we go, that's what you're seeing, I hope. So when I look at this whole list, I see just that I have a label control named label 1 and a label control named label 2. All of this information before that keyword label is just a specific library location where we can find the definition of a label. So I could take out the system.windows.forms, and it should be the same, right? Because we have a using statement for that library. Do we have a using statement? Oops, Control Z. Do we have a using statement in this one? No. So that's why it's all fully qualified, because they just put everything in there. But we could add a using statement and then delete that. Now we see that we have labels and text boxes and radio buttons. So we could create these kind of controls in our code too. We just let the Windows Form Designer do it. But there's nothing that says we couldn't. Okay, now I'm going to expand this Form Designer generated code. And in our Form Designer generated code, this is the area where we're seeing that error. If we have a control that we accidentally double clicked on and we delete that event code out, then we get an error. And that error is within our form generated code. So again, I'm looking at my initialized components. Now I'm using those definitions to create new instances of our form labels and text boxes and all that wonderful stuff. Down at the very bottom, I will add all these controls to our form, and that's what makes them actually show up. But up here, our code is just declaring them. So I've got this information that creates instances of all of these form controls. And then we get into specific property settings for each of our controls. So like for our label 1, here's all the properties that Windows decided need to be set. Label 2, we can see all of our different labels. And then we start with our text boxes. These are going to be the order that we put things on the form, right? Here's our numeric up down with all our valid values. More text boxes. And finally, our OK button. Our OK button has something special, and that is our event handler that says when somebody clicks this button, we want to run our button OK _ click event. So this line of code is what creates that connection, the wiring of that button to this event. So let's look at another PowerPoint to talk about that. This is a delegate. Delegates are really powerful. You can tell they kind of try to hide them from us. But what is an event, first of all? We have seen that like clicking a button is an event. A birthday party is an event, right? Our birthday party properties are going to be like the date of the party, the location of the party, who the party's for, what time it is. We'll have all those different properties associated with the birthday party. But we're going to actually be wired to the birthday party process for kicking off this actual event, passing things out and singing happy birthday and all those actions that occur as part of the process. So that'll be our event. When we're working with Windows Forms, our events are basically the same. We allow the user to decide when they're going to run. So we have a button here, and when our user decides it's time, they click that button. Well, within our form control, we have that button associated with an event. That event occurs that runs a specific piece of code. In this example, it's that picture box 1 _ click method that's associated with this event. So that's what will run. And in that event, we might change the form's appearance, update it, modify it, and then we're going to redisplay the form, again, sitting there waiting for an event. So that's event-driven processing. But we can use a special feature called a delegate to determine what happens when that event is kicked off. So what is a delegate? Well, these pictures are like what the word means, right? A delegate, or I delegated the work, means I assigned it to somebody else. I gave it to somebody else. So here in the little cartoon, she says, what happened to the project I delegated to you? And he says, I delegated it. Okay? It's kind of passing the buck, but it's an important way of getting work done. Up here, we've got, you know, the leader, and he's delegating control to all of the little blue guys. Looks almost political. It was not meant to be. So C# delegates are used to connect our C# methods with a form event. When we do that, when we create this delegate, that connection is called wiring. We are wiring our method to the event. This picture shows another way that delegates can be used, and it's pretty powerful. Say I have 3 functions. All of them do a thing like print. But this function prints things in one way, this function prints things in another way, and this function prints them a third way. So I can set those up with a delegate. So the delegate offers a way to determine which of the functions actually gets called. Then, whenever the user generates an event that associates itself with that delegate, the right method will be called. So here's a picture, sort of, like the ugliest picture ever, and it's really like a good one. So here's an example. One of our print methods is called print number. In our print number method, we expect a number to be passed to us, and we're going to write some information out to the console. Now, our other print methods are below this, and we can't necessarily see them, but they do other printing things. We also have a delegate declared that says, hey, I am called print. And if somebody calls me, depending on how they pass their information, their signature, I'm going to call the appropriate print function. In our case, we only have print number. So somebody says, all righty, I'm going to do it. I'm going to instantiate a print instance. I'm going to call it print delete, and I want it to use the print number method. In that case, the print number method will be executed with whatever value we've placed in our delegate, and we can get that method to run. I could have additional delegate statements, public delegate, void print, you know, with another print method. So the delegates are very, very powerful. They're not used very often because they are kind of confusing. So here's the way the delegate works for an event. Our delegate name is event handler. So any sort of control that we put on our form could use the event handler. Our button one click says, I want to add to the event handler events that we've been building. And I want to say this one runs the method button one _ click. So that creates that wiring. If somebody clicks button one, we know the event handler for that is button one _ click. It's associated. So we've got our this keyword, say this is our form that we're looking at. We've got our delegate event handler that it's using. And whenever we execute our method, the event happens, we'll execute our method. This is the line that we sometimes have to delete if we accidentally double click on something, is our delegate line. So we can see that that's a little different than standard code. Let me go back to that code we were looking at. Because we have our OK button that's an event handler. What about, we didn't create any events for our radio buttons, but we could have. The other one we created an event for is if somebody clicks on our LISTBOX. So here's our delegate for that. It says the event handler for this LISTBOX CD selected index changed property is this method. So that's what's going to run if that occurs. Now, I've had like one person in C#2 use delegates in their implementation, and it was a really, really elegant solution. It's a really nice way to do things. But again, it's not used super often. So we need to update our form list application. The last thing we did was add our code to disable all of our detail items. And we decided that we're going to allow people to add new audio CDs and change CDs that are there and delete CDs that are there. So we're going to be adding some code to our application. Before we do that though, I'd like to show you how to use menus so that we can do that in our application. So let's create a new project. I'm going to name it Menu App 102. I'm going to say no on my changes because I kind of messed stuff up. All right, so here's my new application. What I'm going to do with this one is add a menu. We're used to Windows applications having menu controls. We know that they tried to eliminate that in Office, and what happened is they sort of came back, right? So they had gotten to a point where we didn't really have a menu at all, just the different ribbons, but it was just so hard on everybody that they kind of put the menus sort of back. Still a little different. We can have different versions of Windows that have different menuing. So we'll use what's available to us in Visual Studio for now. So the first thing I want to do is update my form, but I need to finish that presentation first. Sorry. I got a little bit carried away, excited about our menu. You probably already know these terms, but I got to make sure. Whenever we're designing forms, we have some tools that we can use for our design. If we're working with a design team and we're just talking to users and we don't have any sort of development tools available, we might have to draw what our form is going to look like as a wireframe. That's just a mock-up of what we think this form is going to look like. Adobe XD is pretty new and is supposed to do an excellent job at that kind of thing. So it's a great tool. Now, once we have a form designed, we might want to start indicating what kind of actions are going to occur based on different pieces of the form. So that could lead us to a storyboard. So looking at this storyboard, we have a mobile app, and we're saying this button here, if somebody clicks it, it does something, and we have all sorts of different buttons that do things. The storyboard shows multiple forms or interfaces designed, multiple wireframes, and then it shows kind of the path that we're going to take from one to the next. So we can see this, clicking this icon is going to start our intro screen, and if somebody clicks this button down here, it's going to load this window, and we can see that the interface might be getting a little confusing. So notice how the storyboard kind of helps us figure those things out, and we can take this to the user and say, does this seem right? And they can get a lot of information out of that storyboard. But even better for them might be a prototype. And a prototype simulates the functioning application. So we have like button controls and things, and our buttons don't really have any code other than the navigation of our application, so that if they click a button, it moves to another point. And this kind of prototype will let the user interact. They'll be able to see what it feels like, see if it makes sense. So they can kind of check off or sign off on that final feature. So These are just one of many different design tools we could use, but pretty standard, and they're kind of a progression. We start with the wireframe of what an individual form or interface is going to look like. The storyboard lets us indicate how they will be connected, and the prototype gives us a simulated application. We did our LISTBOX control already, but there is this computer club one available in the videos if you want to take a look at it. And I think it's one that I have loaded as a zip file in Kansas. Kansas. No, I am not going to Kansas. In Canvas. So I don't know why I was worried about Kansas. I guess that everybody keeps saying that things are not good in Kansas since they've never locked down. All right, we've got our LISTBOX. We've used it. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to add a Menustrip. Our Menustrip object is always placed right below the title. We can find it in our component tray. And there's the hotkeys, the shortcut keys are called access keys. So you'll see what I mean there, an access key. One last thing. WPF is short for Windows Presentation Foundation. We're using WinForms, and Windows Forms have been hugely popular for a very long time, but they are specific to Windows. We are using that Windows Form Designer code, and unfortunately, they have a pixel-based resolution. They're not responsive, they're not adaptive, they don't do any sort of automatic, adjustments. So Windows Forms can be somewhat limiting. Now, looking at the capstone class, at the end of the semester, the last several semesters, we've had several projects that were Windows Forms-based projects that the users have been really, really happy to have. Some users, some companies, small companies, don't want all of their computers connected to the internet. They don't want that expense. They also don't want that risk for infection. So there really are a lot of companies around that have a network within their own company, but none of those computers have access to the internet. And for a setup like that, the Windows Forms is just the ideal solution, right? They are all running Windows. You'd be surprised at how many companies are like that. Now, other than that, we can have a lot of information, a lot of functionality that works really good with the Windows Form. So WPF is a newer implementation. WPF is designed to be more open. It runs on multiple platforms, not just Windows. It uses XAML as the code, and XAML is a tag-based language like HTML, where we have a begin tag and an end tag. So it's very familiar to people that have been coding HTML, pretty easy to use. It uses vector-based resolution, so it's independent of the platform and can, be responsive to the platform that it's running on, so it does have a lot of capabilities. This is something that you might want to look at on your own. I have a person in the morning class that asked if they could write the applications that we do using WPF. That's fine. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I'm happy to help. So just be aware there are these two different methods. When you know how to use Windows Forms, moving to WPF is just a piece of cake. It's not going to be a problem for you at all. All right, there is a WPF app development that is out also in our video library, so you can take a look at that if you want. In the end, you can tell this registration form doesn't really look much different than a Windows form. It's just that it would be able to run on multiple platforms. So if my company doesn't care about that, there really isn't any reason for me to do that. One control that we haven't looked at yet that's pretty powerful is the tab control. I didn't give you this assignment to create the pizza app because of our virus thing, and you guys have enough work to do, but it is something that is in that PDF document if you want to take a look at it and do some experimenting. But a tab control just gives us tabs. We can define what each tab is named, And this kind of eliminates the need for multiple forms. We can place tab controls and we can set each tab's properties. We can add items like these drink selections to each tab's page. And down at the bottom, outside of the tab control, we could put common controls that affected all the tabs, like our OK button, or whatever we wanted. So the tab control is powerful, but we're going to use a menu. All right, now we're there. So let's fix up our form. I think I want my form to say menu F. And I'm going to change my back color. Let's see, I think I did. I'll do orange. Ooh, make you blind. Now my fore color, I'll make a brown. So you see me making you blind so that you'll think about these things in the future. Don't do that to people. All right, I can't even see my fore color. Let's put a label on here. I'm gonna put a label up here at the top. My label, it's gonna say, choose a menu item. And I want this message to be much, much bigger. I'm going to change my font. There we go. Make my form a little smaller. And now what I want is a menu to go across the top. I was mentioning how, Windows is really consistent, that common look and feel, common look and feel. That's how people learn how to use Windows easily. Over the Coronication or whatever that was called, I was trying to work with a different system, with a Linux system. And so one of the first things that I want to do is get that X system up and running so that I can have my graphical common look and feel. I don't want to do the commands, but I would rather work with an environment that has a nice consistent look and feel for me. So when we're looking at Windows menus, they're also very consistent, right? We always have File, Edit, View. Then after that, we might have some other things. And then at the end, we usually have Help, right? So consistency. So our File menu is usually first, and things that we have on our File menu are usually things to do with files, like create a new one, open one, close one, and finally exit. So really that's all we're going to put on our menu is File, Exit. Let's do it. I'm going to roll this up because I want to look at this menus and toolbars category. One of the reasons that Windows has that common look and feel is because they offer common controls. Common controls. So whenever I want to open a file in Windows, that file open dialog box, usually it's pretty common. It's usually the same. I know how to interact with it. So when I look at my menus and toolbars category, I see some of those common controls. I want the menu strip. So I'm just going to put a menu strip on my form. You can see that it's snapped to the top because that's where menus belong, right? We can change it, of course, but that is where menus go. Now, some other things. My menu strip is showing up down here. We've never had anything down in this area. This area is the component tray. This area is where special components will be saved. It's the component tray because it's kind of like the key tray. If you have a tray at your house where when you come home, everybody throws their keys on the key tray. I don't, but I've heard there's organizational houses like that that do. That's what this is, the component tray that holds all of these special type of components. So looking at our menu strip, we have properties for the menu strip as a whole. I could change if I wanted to. I don't really want to change any of those, so I'll just leave it as is. But I want to start creating this menu. So I'm going to click where it says type here and put in file. It's going to be my file menu. And under file, I want to have exit. I'm going to put those two in, and then I want to run this so we can see what the menu looks like. Okay, so now we see our file menu already enabled, and Windows is taking care of a lot of the way that that works, right? So if I click on it, I see my exit option. My exit option, of course, doesn't do anything yet because I don't have any code associated with it. Whenever I'm working with Windows, I can use the Alt key to activate my menus. So press your Alt key. Notice how I get that little underline character by those access keys, by those hotkeys. I know that if I press the key F, that's going to activate my file menu. Now, looking at my file menu, the access key to exit is X. Got that little teeny underline under it. Well, we need to get those on ours. So in our file menu, we want that underline to be under the letter F. So I'm going to put an ampersand character before the F. The ampersand indicates that the following letter is the access key for this menu. So now I've got the little underline under my F. My exit menu, that needs to go on the X character. So I'm going to add an ampersand right there before the X. Now if we run again, press Alt, we should see the access key line. I can press F to activate file, and I can X to exit. So we can do all of those things. Now, each of these menu items is a separate control on our form. So if I click on File, my Properties window shows me my File toolstrip menu item. I could rename those, but that's a pretty good name, right? I know it's my File menu, so I'm okay with that. Now, again, I have more properties I could change if I wanted to. I could set my menu text in my text property. So we can do a lot with our menus. Let's fill that out. After File, we want Edit. With the Edit menu, it's the E that is the access key. That's why our exit command can't have the E. And then in our Edit menu for our little application here, we're going to allow them to edit the font. I'm not going to put an access key control with that because it's just not a common menu item. Next, our Help menu. And with our Help menu, it's the H that is the access key. And we're going to create Help About. So, menu. Now our About, it was the A that is the access key. So I need to put that before the A. All right. Now let's run it. Make sure it all looks good. Menus are pretty easy. It should be okay. Great. Let's add some code. You're okay. Now I'm going to double click on my file exit first to add code for it. So if somebody chooses exit, I want to exit out of this application. Do I have a method to exit or leave? Oh, yep, there it is. exit. I know it's a method because it's got the purple square. So that means I need open and close parentheses because it's a method. That should do our exit. Let's try it. File, exit. No, it's working. Okay, so let's get our other ones in there. Madison, go ahead and create this menu real fast because it's going to really impact what we do. And you don't have to have it perfect. Just put some words in there so that you can have some event procedures associated with them. So we used the Menustrip control, dropped it on our form, and then we clicked up here in that type here area, and we put the menu names, file, edit, and help. And under our file menu, we put an exit, and we just double clicked that to add our code to exit the application. Now I want to do our help about. You may not have ever used a help about, but if you've talked to tech support people, you have. So it is a Windows standard that applications should have an about form. Here's the about form for Visual Studio. It's really intense because Visual Studio is a big package and it has a lot of pieces. Some about forms only say the name of the product and the version, maybe a copyright date, some licensing information. But that's what the help about form is. In that way, when you're talking to tech support, they can say, look at help about. What version are you running of Microsoft Visual Studio tools for applications? And you could give them this number. Okay. So to display our about, we're going to use a second form. So to add the form, I'm going to right click on my project and I'm going to choose add. And on my add menu, I can find Windows form. Now it's going to try to name this form 2, and that's not a very good name. So I'm going to name it form about. So here's my about form. I'm going to make it a little smaller. And then I'm going to go to my all Windows controls and maybe find a label. And I'll just say that this is menu app version 1.0. Make that a little bigger. And then I could put some additional information. Let's use a text box. And in this text box, I would like it to be multiple lines. I don't want it to just be one line. So I'm going to find the multi-line property and change that from false to true. Now, when I set my text property, I should be able to click this drop down and see multiple lines of information for me to enter. The menu app version 1.0 created by OTC students pandemic 2020, something along those lines. Just wanted to make a multiple lines. So even though I made it multi-line, I still had to stretch it out myself. What tabs? Madison, what are you talking about with tabs? You just use that menu control. The one that had exit. Yeah, that's just this menu control. So it is a Menustrip type object. Okay, so my form about is not super pretty. I can make it much nicer, but it's going to get the purpose across. So let's see if we can display this thing. We want this to display if somebody clicks Help About. So in our Help About, we're going to say, I'd like to instantiate a new instance of a form. I'm going to call it About. It's going to be a new form about. So this is the first time we've ever used like different properties, different names in our declaration, instantiation of an item. So we're saying this is a form object. It is a form about object. So we can do that as long as form about is a type of form. Now we would like to display that thing. And if we look through all the properties and methods that are available to our form instance, I'm going to type an S because there's a lot of them. We'll see that we can do a lot of showing. We could show an icon, show in taskbar. We could show dialogue. We could just show. So all of those things will work. Well, if we just show this form, our Form 1 application will continue running. So they'll both be running concurrently. If we do show dialogue, our Form 1 form will like pause and wait for the processing to get done on this form before it continues. And we want it to work that way. So let's use show dialogue. So let's see what that does. Help, about, there's our subform. Awesome, so we need an OK button or something on here. Let's fix it. In our about form, to get out of it, let's put a button. I'm going to make it say OK, and we'll name it button OK. And if somebody clicks that, we just want to close this little form. So we don't have to worry too much about what our form is named at this point. We just say, close me. Does that update it properly? We've got a lot of functionality there. Okay, so perfect. Yep, pretty neat. So that's why I wanted to separate this out into a separate application, because I want you guys to be able to identify this code. Our other application, it's really cool that we can create real world type things, but we end up with a lot of code. And so we sometimes have to just create separate projects so we can isolate things a little bit. Okay, so now we have, I'm going to stop running there. We have our file menu implemented and our help menu implemented, but what about our edit? In our edit font, we're going to allow the user to choose a different font. We'd like to display the common Windows font dialog. If I scroll down to my font property and I click in it, the ellipsis will bring up that common font dialog control. You've seen it a lot. Hey, it's even the one for like WordPad or something. I can choose my font name, whether it's bold or italicized, the size, effects, things like that. And I am seeing a sample of what I've chosen, so that's really helpful. So we can implement this same exact font dialog box. Let's do it. Before we write our code, we need to add that common dialog, that font dialog, to our application. So it is under all Windows forms, of course, but it is also under dialogues, because I keep saying it's a common dialog, common dialog. So our dialogues here, here's our font dialog. I'm going to pop that onto the form. And again, you'll see it doesn't show up on the form at all, but it's down here in our component tray. Now, if we look at our font dialog's properties, we'll see properties that are much different than what we've been working with so far, because font has different properties. So for our common dialog control, we have properties like, do you want me to show the color choices? Should we show the help options? So these are the kinds of things that we can change with the properties. So now we're ready to use our code to implement this thing. I'm going to double click on my font menu to create my code. So it is font dialog 1, and we would like to show that dialog. We're going to need to do more than that, but that's going to be our start. So let's run that so you can see how it works. Now I've got edit, and I'm going to choose font. And there is our common Windows font dialog. So it's nice that we can use these pieces that are already pre-built for us. Now we can look around, choose all sorts of different things. If we click OK, nothing's going to happen because we haven't implemented anything in our code yet. So we need more code. Close this. Well, what kind of code do we need? Let's go check. What if I wasn't sure and I searched for the C# font dialog? Someone said I had to do this, so I just want to know about it. Now, if I look at the results that I get, let's kind of look through. First of all, it's from Microsoft, so that's probably a really, really good source of information, but it's not going to offer me a lot of example code, right? And I'm kind of looking for an example. C# Corner seems to be a pretty good site. They do some interesting things. Here's more C# Corner. That's kind of a new one. .NET Pearls always offers some good samples. This one, again, there's a lot of new ones, but you know, there's always lots of people trying to learn how to program. They always hear there's lots of money there. Nobody thinks they need classes. But you know, some people don't. But anyways, some of these I'm not familiar with at all, so I'm not going to waste my time. I know that I've looked at .NET Pearls before, and it's had some really good examples, so I'm going to look at it. And I see that they have the font dialog, so it is the right thing. That's what I'm looking for. And they say if you want to add this to a program, just add it. And here's our code. Right here, show the dialog. Well, we have this part where we're doing the show dialog, but we don't have this prefix. So let's put that in. So now we just said we want to create a variable named result. This variable is the data type dialog result. So it's going to know how to interpret the result from this. What's the result going to be? Well, it's going to be OK if they clicked the OK button. It's going to be cancel if they clicked the cancel button. So if they clicked the OK button, we want to change the font on our form. But if they clicked cancel, we don't. So we're going to have something like, if our result equals the dialog result of OK, then we can do something. First, we want to get the font that they picked. So we're going to create a variable again to hold that font information. So it's data type font, and we're going to name our variable font. And we are going to say that we want to look at our font dialogues font. So whatever they picked, let's save it. One more time, and I'm going to copy this, just so we don't miss it. So now we're going to set our properties. Ours was a label. So we're going to set our label's text equal to the name of the font that they picked. And then we're going to set our label's actual font equal to the font they picked. Now, we didn't have to set this variable here. We could have just said font dialog one.font there too, right? So lots of ways. Okay, let's try it. That should be it. So I'm going to go edit font, and I want to pick something weird and make sure it changes it. Oh, there we go. So we see the name of the font I picked and then the font itself. Cool. Is everybody's working? Did you find it, Madison? We'll get it for you. Yay. It works very, very cool. So again, I keep saying it, Windows forms are kind of old, but they work really good. So we just keep using them. We haven't found anything that works better. Now, when we were looking at that presentation and I told you there was WinForms and there was WPF, the third option for user interfaces are our website implementations, right? Like Frankie was doing, and we see that that's becoming super, super popular. So you might get to a point where we might get to a point as developers where C# code is all back end, but Microsoft is working on overtaking that front end world from web developers too. So it's always an exciting future for us in the development environment. There's always going to be changes and new things to learn and all that exciting stuff. So what about our font here? What if we tried some of those other properties? Are you getting up? Thanks, Madison. Let us know. So whenever we were looking in that font dialog box, down here in our component tray, if we click on font dialog, I want to try one. Let's try show color. Let's make that true. And let's run this again. I could actually do that in my code too, couldn't I? Now I've got the color choice here. Try something. And it didn't affect my color. So we need to add some code to look at what color they chose on that dialog box. Our label for color we know is our font. So let's see, we should be able to set that equal to our font dialogs. And we could look through all of the properties and methods, but we're looking for color, and there is a color property. Wrench means property. So I should be able to update my color that way. Let's try it. So it's all working. So notice the size of the font was tied to the font itself, but the color wasn't. So sometimes there's things like that we just can't know from looking at it without, us experimenting with it to find out. Okay, is everybody's working okay? Yay, before we go on, because we're going to add a little bit more. The color thing. First, on the font dialog itself and its properties, I changed the show color to true. And then in the code, we added updating the for color to the color they chose from the font dialog. You can see it? That is so cool. Okay, so I like menus because I think that when you're talking about prototype applications that you want to give to users, the menu control really makes it easy to generate those kinds of things, really makes it easy for you to give the user something that really give them the good look and feel for what this application is going to look like without it really having to do a lot of work. But what else? Whenever we look at a common Windows application, it's not just the menus, is it? We don't use those as often as some other things. We also need a toolbar. So our toolbar down here, pretty important. We use that quite a bit to indicate what we want, what kind of action we want to occur. So we can do a toolbar pretty easily too. Let's go back to our form. Now toolbars usually come right below the menu bar. We usually only have items on our toolbar that also appear on the menu bar. We might have a few that don't, but in general, they're menu items. We've just pulled them out of the menus to make them easily accessible because they're most commonly used items in our menus. Now, when we look at menus and toolbars, we want a tool strip. That's what a toolbar comes from. So I'm going to put this tool strip on my form, and again, it's going to snap to the top. My tool strip has placed itself down here in my component tray, so I can find it. And I can look at properties for it. Again, different properties than what I might see for a text box, but some of the same ones. So it looks okay. Now, whenever I'm working with a toolbar, I can have buttons, I might have drop downs, I can have little text boxes, all sorts of different controls. So, we're used to seeing some unusual stuff up there. So this little item is how we add something to our toolbar. So if you click the drop down, you'll see there's lots of different types of things that we can add. We just want to use a button. In our button then, we can name it. Let's check what its name is. Oh, that's not a very good name. Our menu control was naming things very well, but our tool strip, not so much. So instead of this being tool strip button 1, let's name this. It can't name them. It doesn't know what we're going to do with it. But this is going to be our file exit. So let's name this tool strip button 1 exit. So it goes along with our menu. The only other controls that I'd be really concerned with on a tool strip are the image that's displayed and the tooltip. So let's go down to the tooltip and let's change that. Let's say something like exit app, because tooltips are short, right? Just a tip. If you click this, it's going to exit the app. Now, those are the properties we'd want to change, and we want an image. And you know we use standard images for these things so that people know what they're looking at. Let's click the 3 ellipses here to add an image. And I always want images to go into my project resource file. And click import. And I could, you can see I've got some stuff here I'm going to show you. But I'm going to go to my C drive, and I could go to my program files, and where's Visual Studio? It must be in the other one. Visual Studio. Oh, I've got Visual Studio 10.0, 14.0. I'm going to look at just Visual Studio 2017. I'm looking for all the images. Oh, and they're around here somewhere. If I look, there's some stuff, but it's a mess. So there's a better way. Let's go online. I'm going to search for the Microsoft Image Library. And of course, there's a royalty-free one, but I want the actual Microsoft one. So I'm going to get the one from Microsoft. And they want you to buy a Surface. I wonder if you could get one. Brand new Surface. I'm going to look at the details here about this. What do I want to do? Do I want to download this? Okay. When you click download, you'll be prompted to know which version of images you want to download. If you want some older images, earlier Windows, you could do the Visual Studio 2012. The one that I downloaded was the Visual Studio 2019 image library. You could also download the EULAs, the end user license agreements, that remind you how you are allowed to use these images. So those are important, because you can only use them in the agreed upon way. But I went ahead and downloaded this Visual Studio 2019 image library. So I chose it, and of course you can choose multiples. Now, one thing to notice is that it's only 10 meg. The Visual Studio 2015, which is the first time I downloaded this whole library, is almost 3 gig. So they've really, really cleaned up the images. The Visual Studio 2015 option has like every Windows image you could ever want. So if you have a lot of time and you'd really like to have them all, that one probably has the most. After that, they cleaned it up a little bit, compressed it so that it wouldn't take 4 hours to download. So I'm going to grab that one. And it seemed like last time, this morning, it downloaded really fast, but then that completion activity took a really, really long time, so it really didn't download that fast. Okay, it's done, sorry. So I'm going to show that in my downloads folder, and I will extract. And I want to extract it to a different place. I don't want it to go into my downloads folder. I want to keep it. So I put it on my C drive, and I just created a folder, Visual Studio 2019 Image Library, and extracted to that library. Okay. You can do that now. You can get them later. You can maybe even just get the ones that you want. So I've got my image library now. I'm going to go ahead and import an image. If I look in my Visual Studio 2019 image library, I see the folder. And when I open that, I see all sorts of folders, and these are all folders for different actions, different icons, different kinds of images that we might find. We're going to be doing an exit for this. So I'm going to put an E in, and I want to find my exit. See if there is a folder named exit, because if there's not, you know, I might have to decide something better. Oh, there is. So I'm going to look in that exit folder, and I'll use this ugly image. That's fine. Okay, now I've got my toolbar configured. Let's run it. Now, here's our menu bar all working, and here's our toolbar. And if you mouse over your icon, you should see that tooltip. That will exit our app. Now, right now, we don't have that associated with anything. So let's fix that. I'm going to double click it to create an event procedure. And you know, I already have those that exit event for the menu. So I want to move this one up there with that other one. You don't want them to be so far apart. So now I've got my menu exit and my toolstrip button exit. They're both going to have the same code, and I don't like that. I don't want them to both have the same code. What if our users come back and they say that, oh, whenever somebody closes the application, we want 17 message boxes to display with all of these instructions? Well, then we would have to duplicate that code in each of these event procedures too. So the best thing for us to do would be to create a new method. And this would be exit our app. And if we run our exit app, we want to do an application close or exit. Pivot. There we go. Now I want to execute this method. If somebody clicks my tool strip, and if somebody clicks my menu. So nice. Now I've got both menu items or both events running the same method. Let's run it and see. Make sure our file exit still works. And then we'll try our toolbar. Yay! Yay! Looks good. Okay, so that's our exit stuff. Now, on our form, I can't really think of any way to do our font as a toolbar icon. So let's just add our help about. So I'm going to add a new button. This is going to be toolstrip button about. We want the tool tip to say about our app. And we want our image so let's see what kind of image we have. We want it to be imported into our project. So I want to see if there's actually an about folder. Nope. We could use help, right? Okay, well, let me go. Do you see one that you'd like? I'm just going to find help. Got help application. Let's try it. That looks good. That's an interesting icon. There we go. Not too bad. Now I want to add some code for that one. So I'm going to double click it. Now this is my about. So again, I want to move it to be with my menu about so that they're both together. And we want to create a new method that they can both call. Our method should instantiate a form object and display it. We'll call our method from our toolstrip and from our menu. So you can see how, oh cool, I like the information one too. I think that's a good one. But you can see how easy it is for us to expand things because now we're actually getting that code reuse. We've created our methods. We're going to reuse our methods so that we don't care if the user clicks the menu or that toolstrip image. We're going to do the same thing. So we can keep all of our code focused in these methods that are doing the work and let all of our event procedures just call those. Let's make sure it's all working. Got my tooltip. There's my about. I think everything looks good. So we didn't set up a toolbar item for our font because it's just a weird one. But we could find a font picture really easily. Okay. Crikeys, that looks good, huh? Let's try to open that class diagram for our form now. Ah, that's better. Now our methods are showing up for this one. But we can really easily then make sure we've got everything coded, and you can see kind of why I wanted to keep them together. Now again, our naming could be better. You know, we might decide, oh, we should have put that toolstrip name at the beginning instead of the end, or you can see why naming standards would matter a lot. So we can try different things. But we can make sure that we've got all of our different methods implemented, and we can really quickly look at the documentation to see what all is part of our application. Any questions? Everybody looking okay? I think we're good. Let's add some comments. So I'm going to start at the top. Let's do it. I can delete out these unused using statements, clean up my application so that it's not using space that it doesn't need. I'll put in a comment. This class defines actions for the form. And then let's put in a comment for each method. This is the constructor. Here we have this is our menu. And then right after that, we have our toolstrip exit. And then our method that actually exits the app. So as we use these comments, you can tell it would be best to comment as we're coding, but if we haven't, it's easy enough to add them in. So here is our menu, exit the app. I want to be consistent. Menu about. And then finally, we will show the about form. Now, our last one we're going to show and process the font dialog. The font dialog and that common look and feel is something that we'll be experimenting with a lot because we'll be using the open dialog and the save as dialog box to work with text files next week. So we'll be using some of those other common controls. So I think that our menu application is done. I'm going to save it all. Like I said, I wanted it to be a small application for you as an example, but you can see how Forms apps can kind of get large very quickly because of all of the different pieces. Each piece is small, each piece is maintainable, so each piece makes everything easier to keep track of and to keep updated. I'm going to look at Canvas here. So we have our Unit 3 exams coming up. April 22nd is when the stuff is due. Tonight, the hot and cold game is due. Is everybody doing okay with that? Kind of wanted to mention something that might be important. Somebody messaged last night about how it was really kind of difficult to change the back color of the form, and that's true. And that's kind of a Windows change, or when forms change. It used to just be the same as changing the back color of any other control, and then it sort of changed. So I suggested to them one thing to think about is maybe filling the form with a group box or something where you can just change the color of it. So remember, if you seem to be working outside the bounds of the language, that there might be a better way. So the assignment does say to change the back color of the form, but having a control on the form that makes it look like the form color was changed would be all right also. So that is a possibility. For the, let's see, we've already looked at the survey form. You know that that's all multiple choice. So next week, we'll be adding our add, change, and delete buttons to our application and getting this exam out of the way. And then after that, we'll only have left working with text files type controls and our final. So your final project will be a lot like this audio CD application, where we'll have like a list of things that you can select from. So should be pretty similar. We're going to add our menus and things to that too. Okay, so questions? Oh, okay. So on TFS, when that happens, in our Discord server, if you click on our TFS channel, scroll up just a little bit, there's actually a Stack Overflow article published there, how to move a project from Git to TFS in Visual Studio. So if you want to take a look at those instructions and see if you can get it from that, that'll work. And you can sure let me know if that doesn't take care of it, and we'll figure it out. But that is a real problem. You'll just have to delete some hidden files, and then you should be able to move it to TFS fairly easily. Is anybody else having any trouble with TFS like that? Because I'd really like to get those resolved. You know, if we were having any issues, want everybody to have access to their repository for our unit exam. I have a student in the other class who is able to access his TFS stuff, but I can't see it. So that's an interesting one. I've never had that before. So we want to make sure we're finding, you know, problems, things like that now, so that we can get them to the help desk in time to get them fixed. Good, good, good. No issues, yay. For the hot and cold, yes, if you could use that program submission document. I know that it doesn't say to do that, but if you just have an old version of it that you could use, that would help me out. When I grade that one, and a lot of these Windows Forms ones, past our Hello World and stuff, I'll try to create a folder of executables that I can share with everybody, so you guys can go through and run everybody else's application and see, you know, what they're like, and kind of see how yours stacked up to theirs, because these are usually pretty fun to run. So we'll see how that all works out. Any others? Great. I think that everything's looking really good. So let me know if I'm wrong, you're having problems, so we can get it all straightened out. Do mess with the menu controls and the common dialogue controls. You can even try like setting up a menu and just having it display a message box. You know, if somebody clicks on the menu, just to experiment with it. Well, alrighty then, guys are doing great. If everybody's good, I'm gonna close this thing. Let me know if you need anything.